The morning sun peeked through the worn curtains of the small Boston apartment as Olivia Matthews stretched and yawned. Today was her 17th birthday, but it felt like any other day. Her mum would be working a double shift at the hospital, and they'd probably have cake over the weekend when she wasn't so tired. Olivia brushed her long brown hair and stared at her reflection. People always said she had interesting eyes, not quite blue, not quite green, with little golden flecks that caught the light. "You got those from your father," her mum would say, then quickly change the subject. Her father. The mysterious Englishman who existed only in her imagination and in the few stories her mother would share after a glass of wine. He was charming and kind, she'd say. "We met during my summer abroad in London. He made me laugh." But whenever Olivia asked for more, her mum would get that faraway look and say, "Some things aren't meant to be, sweetie." In the kitchen, Olivia found a small wrapped gift and a card propped against a box of her favorite cereal. The card simply read, "Happy birthday, my brave girl. It's time. Love, Mom." Confused, Olivia opened the gift, a small wooden box with a delicate flower carved on top. Her hands trembled as she lifted the lid. Inside lay an envelope yellowed with age, and on top of it, a strange-looking ring with some kind of symbol pressed into the metal. Olivia's heartbeat quickened as she opened the envelope and pulled out a faded photograph and a handwritten letter. The photo showed a young man, maybe 25, with the same unusual eyes as hers. He wore casual clothes and stood laughing in front of a fountain, his arm around a younger version of her mother. They looked so happy that it made Olivia's chest hurt. She unfolded the letter, the paper thin and delicate between her fingers. "My dearest Anna," it began, and Olivia could almost hear the words in a British accent. "If you're reading this, then you've decided to tell our child about me. I hope you can forgive me someday for not fighting harder to stay. The impossible circumstances that keep us apart are stronger than my own wishes, though nothing is stronger than the love I felt for you during our summer together. Know that leaving you was the hardest thing I've ever done. My position and my family's expectations have trapped me in a life I never chose. By the time you discover you're carrying our child, I will be engaged to someone else, fulfilling obligations that have been planned since my childhood. And leave you this ring as proof of who I am, should you ever need it. But I beg you not to contact me or attempt to claim anything from my family. It would only bring pain and scandal that would hurt all of us, especially our child. I will think of you both every day for the rest of my life. Forever yours, Edward." Olivia read the letter 3 times, her hands shaking harder with each reading. She picked up the ring, turning it in the sunlight. It was heavy, made of gold, with some kind of family crest stamped into it. She rushed to her laptop and searched "Edward British signet ring." Hundreds of images popped up, but one made her stop breathing for a second. There it was, the exact same crest. The caption read, "The royal signet of Prince Edward Windsor, Crown Prince of England." Olivia fell back in her chair, staring at the screen. She clicked on images of the prince, comparing them to the photo in her hand. The young man in her mother's photo had no beard and longer hair, but the eyes, her eyes, were unmistakable. She called her mom at work, something she almost never did. "Mom," she whispered when her mother answered, "my father is the Crown Prince of England." The long silence on the other end was all the confirmation she needed. "We need to talk when I get home," her mother finally said, her voice tight. Olivia hung up and looked around the tiny apartment where she'd grown up. The faded furniture, the patched walls, the view of the brick building next door. All while her father lived in palaces. She picked up the ring again, sliding it onto her thumb, the only finger big enough to hold it. It felt strangely warm against her skin, like it belonged there. In that moment, Olivia made a decision. She wasn't just going to hear her mother's version of the story. She was going to find out the truth for herself. She was going to find her father. Olivia's mom cried when she told her about the plane ticket to London. "You can't just go chasing after him," she said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "The royal family isn't like us. They have rules, security, traditions. They'll never let you near him." But Olivia had already made up her mind. The college fund her grandparents had started for her would cover the flight and a week's stay at a cheap hostel. She'd never been rebellious before, but something inside her had changed since finding that letter. "I'm not asking for money or to become a princess," Olivia explained, folding a sweater into her suitcase. "I just want to see him. Once, just to know." Her mum sat heavily on the bed. "What if he rejects you? What if he doesn't want to be found?" Olivia paused, holding her father's ring. "Then at least I'll know that too." 3 days later, Olivia stepped off the plane at Heathrow Airport, feeling like she'd landed on another planet. Everything was different: the accents, the signs, even the smell of the air. She clutched her backpack tightly as she navigated through crowds toward the underground station. On the train into the city, she pulled out the letter and photo again. A woman sitting across from her glanced over. "First time in London, love?" she asked kindly. Olivia nodded. "Visiting family?" "Sort of," Olivia replied, quickly tucking the photo away. The hostel was in a noisy part of town, with a tiny window that looked out onto a busy street. Olivia sat on her narrow bed, suddenly overwhelmed by what she was doing. What had seemed brave and exciting in Boston now felt foolish and impossible. How exactly was she planning to meet one of the most protected men in England? She wandered the streets that afternoon, finding herself outside Buckingham Palace. Hundreds of tourists pressed against the fence, taking pictures of the changing of the guard. Olivia stood back, watching the ceremony with a strange feeling in her stomach. Somewhere behind those walls was her father. "They only come out on the balcony for special occasions," said a voice beside her. Olivia turned to see a young man about her age. He wore a blue uniform with a name tag that read Denny and carried a tour guide flag. "I wasn't trying to," she started. "No, but you were looking at the palace differently than most tourists," he said with a friendly smile. "They're usually taking selfies, but you were really looking, you know." There was something open and honest about his face that made Olivia relax a little. "I'm actually trying to figure something out," she admitted. "Well, I know pretty much everything about the royals. 3 years as a palace tour guide will do that to you," he laughed. "I'm off duty in 20 minutes if you want a local's advice over a cup of tea." Olivia hesitated. Her mum would kill her for talking to a stranger. But wasn't that what this whole trip was about? Taking chances? Over tea at a cramped cafe, Danny listened as Olivia told a carefully edited version of her story, that she was researching her family history and believed she might have a distant connection to someone who worked for the royal family. "So how would someone get to actually meet any of the royals?" she asked casually. Danny stirred his tea. "Well, they do charity events sometimes. Actually, Prince Edward is opening a new children's hospital wing tomorrow. It's been in the papers." He pulled out his phone and showed her an article. "The public can line up outside, but you have to get there early." Olivia stared at the photo in the article, an official portrait of Prince Edward. He looked different from the laughing young man in her mother's photo. Older, serious with a neatly trimmed beard. But those eyes were the same. "You all right?" Danny asked. "You've gone a bit pale." "I'm fine," she said quickly. "Just jet lag." That night, Olivia could barely sleep. She kept imagining coming face to face with Prince Edward, seeing recognition in his eyes. Or worse, seeing nothing at all. She took out her mother's dress, the nicest thing she owned, and laid it on the chair. Then she slipped the signet ring onto a chain around her neck. Tomorrow, she would look her father in the eye for the first time. What would she say to him? What could she say? By morning, Olivia had a plan. Not a good one, probably, but it was all she had. She would wear the ring where he could see it. If he recognized it, she would know he remembered her mother. If not, she touched the ring hanging around her neck. "I'm coming, Dad," she whispered into the darkness. The children's hospital gleamed in the morning sun, its entrance decorated with blue ribbons and balloons. Olivia arrived 2 hours early, but a crowd had already formed behind the security barriers. She stood in line, her heart pounding so hard she was sure others could hear it. Her mother's dress felt too fancy for daytime, but she wanted to look her best. The navy blue fabric brought out the unusual color of her eyes, his eyes. The royal signet ring hung visibly on the chain around her neck, catching the light when she moved. "You look nice," said a voice behind her. Olivia turned to find Danny smiling at her. "Thought you might need moral support." "You came," she said, surprised and relieved to see a familiar face. "Told my boss I was feeling sick," he winked. "But really, I was curious. Nobody researches distant family connections with that look in their eyes." Olivia blushed. I'm not ready to tell the whole story. Fair enough, he nodded. But whatever you're doing, you seem to need a friend. And I know how these events work, where to stand, when to take photos, that sort of thing. As the crowd grew, Danny guided Olivia toward a spot along the barricade where the prince would walk past. Security officers with earpieces patrolled the area, checking bags and scanning faces. Remember, they move quickly, Danny whispered. You'll have maybe 5 seconds as he passes. Whatever you're planning, make it count. Olivia touched the ring nervously. I just need him to see this. A murmur rippled through the crowd as black cars pulled up. Men in suits emerged first, scanning the area. Then a door opened and Prince Edward stepped out. He was taller than Olivia expected. His blue suit perfectly pressed, his movements practiced and smooth as he waved to the crowd. Several official-looking people walked with him, pointing out where to go, who to greet. Olivia felt frozen as he began making his way down the line, shaking a few hands, accepting flowers from children. He was getting closer. He's coming, Danny nudged her. You all right? You're white as a sheet. Olivia couldn't answer. This man was her father. Half her DNA came from him. Did he ever think about her mother? Did he wonder if there had been a child? Suddenly, he was right in front of her. Prince Edward smiled politely, reaching to shake hands with an elderly woman beside Olivia. His security detail kept a watchful eye on the crowd. It was now or never. Olivia stepped forward, her hand instinctively clutching the ring. Your Highness, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The prince turned toward her, still wearing his public smile. Then his eyes dropped to the ring hanging from her neck. The smile vanished. His face drained of color. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Their eyes met, the exact same unusual color, and Olivia saw something flash across his face. Recognition, shock, something else she couldn't name. Where did you? He began quietly. But his security team had noticed his reaction. A large man stepped between them, while another gently guided the prince forward. Keep moving, sir, Olivia heard one of them say. The prince glanced back at her, his expression troubled, before his professional smile returned and he continued down the line. Did you see that? Olivia whispered to Danny. He recognized the ring. I saw something, Danny agreed, looking concerned. But now his security team is watching you. He was right. One of the men in suits was speaking into his wrist while looking in their direction. We should go, Danny said urgently. Now. But Olivia couldn't move. She'd found him. After 17 years, she'd stood face to face with her father, and he had recognized the ring. As the prince reached the hospital entrance, a woman in a gray suit approached him. He spoke to her briefly, then she turned and scanned the crowd, her eyes settling on Olivia. She's coming this way, Danny warned. The woman walked purposefully toward them. Excuse me, miss, she said quietly when she reached Olivia. May I ask where you got that ring? Olivia's mouth went dry. It was my mother's. The woman studied her face intently. The prince would appreciate it if you would write down your contact information. She slipped a small notepad and pen from her pocket. With shaking hands, Olivia wrote her name, the hostel address, and her phone number. Thank you, the woman said, taking the notepad. Someone may be in touch. She walked away briskly. What just happened? Danny asked, wide-eyed. Olivia watched as the woman returned to the prince's side, showing him the notepad. Even from a distance, she could see his posture change as he read it. I think, Olivia said slowly, I just found my father. What she didn't notice were the photographers who had captured the unusual interaction, or the fact that the prince's security team was now taking pictures of her as she left with Danny. In less than 20, what she didn't notice were the photographers who had captured the unusual interaction, or the fact that the prince's security team was now taking pictures of her as she left with Danny. In less than 24 hours, those photos would change everything. 4 hours, those photos would change everything. Olivia couldn't sleep that night. She kept replaying those few seconds when her eyes had met the prince's, her father's, and the shock that had crossed his face when he saw the ring. He knew, he remembered. But would he reach out to her? A phone rang early the next morning. It was Danny, his voice urgent. Turn on the TV, any news channel, right now. Olivia fumbled for the tiny television in her hostel room. The screen flickered to life and her stomach dropped. There she was, standing in front of Prince Edward, the ring clearly visible in the zoomed-in shot. The headline scrolled across the bottom, "Mystery American Girl Wears Royal Signet. Palace Refuses Comment." "Oh no," she whispered. "There's more," Danny said. "Reporters are asking questions about you. Someone at the event heard you say, 'I found my father,' and told a journalist. They're connecting dots, Olivia." She sank onto the bed. "What have I done?" "You need to get out of there," Danny said firmly. "More reporters will show up at all the hostels near the hospital looking for you. My parents have a cottage outside the city. You can stay there until this blows over." An hour later, Olivia was huddled in the back of Danny's small car as they drove through London's crowded streets. She wore his oversized hoodie with the hood pulled up, hiding her face. "I never meant for this to happen," she said, watching the city give way to green countryside. "I just wanted to see him, maybe talk to him once." "Royal secrets don't stay secret for long," Danny replied, glancing in the rearview mirror. "People are obsessed with them." The cottage was small and cozy, with flowering vines climbing its stone walls. Inside, it smelled of wood smoke and old books. "My parents only come on weekends," Danny explained, showing her to a small bedroom. "You'll be safe here." They watched the news together that afternoon. The story was growing. Someone had found old photos of her mother from her study abroad program. Side-by-side comparisons of Olivia and Prince Edward filled the screen, highlighting their similar eyes. "The prince's wife looks furious," Danny observed as footage showed the royal couple leaving an event, ignoring shouted questions. Olivia felt sick. "I never considered how this would affect his family." Her phone rang again. Unknown number. "Hello," she answered cautiously. "Miss Matthews." A crisp, formal voice. "This is Lady Victoria Sheffield, private secretary to His Royal Highness. The prince has asked me to meet with you, privately and discreetly." Olivia's hand trembled. "Yes, of course. I've been informed you're no longer at your hostel. Wise decision. Can you meet me tomorrow at noon? There's a tea shop called the Fidgeting Teapot in the village of Burnham. Come alone, please." The line went dead before Olivia could respond. "Who was that?" Danny asked. "Someone from the palace," she replied, still staring at her phone. "I think I'm about to get official answers." The village of Burnham was picture perfect, like something from a storybook. The tea shop sat at the end of the high street, partially hidden by an ancient oak tree. Olivia arrived early, choosing a table in the back corner. Lady Victoria Sheffield was instantly recognizable when she entered, tall and elegant, with perfect posture and calculating eyes that took in everything. She was the woman who had asked for Olivia's information at the hospital. "Miss Matthews," she said, sitting down across from Olivia. "Thank you for coming." "Am I in trouble?" Olivia blurted out. A hint of a smile crossed Lady Sheffield's face. "Not exactly. But you've created quite a situation." She ordered tea for them both before continuing. "His Royal Highness was quite affected by your appearance yesterday. That ring belonged to him during a period when he took some personal time before his official duties began. He gave it to my mother," Olivia said quietly. "So it seems." Lady Sheffield studied her carefully. "The resemblance is rather striking, particularly the eyes." "Does he want to meet me?" Olivia asked, heart racing. "That's what I'm here to determine." Lady Sheffield's voice softened slightly. "The prince has responsibilities, duties, 2 legitimate children. His wife comes from one of England's most powerful families. Your sudden appearance has created a delicate situation." Olivia felt tears threatening. "I didn't mean to cause problems. I just wanted to know who he was. And now I want to hear his voice. To know if he ever thought about my mom. To understand why he never looked for me." Lady Sheffield's expression changed, a flash of what might have been sympathy. "There's much you don't know about that time. Perhaps things your mother doesn't know either." She reached into her purse and pulled out a sealed envelope. "The prince asked me to give you this. Read it in private." Before Olivia could respond, Lady Sheffield's phone chimed. She checked it, her face growing tense. "We need to leave, separately. Someone tipped off the press about this meeting." As if on cue, a car pulled up outside, a man with a camera emerging. "Is there a back door?" Lady Sheffield asked urgently. They slipped out through the kitchen just as reporters began entering the front. The last thing Olivia saw before rounding the corner was Lady Sheffield's driver creating a diversion, allowing her to escape unseen down a narrow alley, the unopened letter clutched tightly in her hand. Back at the cottage, Olivia sat on the window seat, turning the sealed envelope over and over in her hands. Outside, rain began to fall, tapping gently against the glass. She took a deep breath and broke the seal. The letter was handwritten on thick cream paper with a royal crest embossed at the top. Dear Olivia, if you are reading this, then Lady Sheffield has determined you are indeed who you appear to be. I find myself in the extraordinary position of writing to a daughter I never knew existed. I would like to meet you, to speak with you face to face, not as Prince Edward, but simply as the man who once loved your mother deeply. If you are willing, Lady Sheffield will arrange everything with the utmost discretion. Tomorrow night, 8 p.m. A car will come for you. Edward. Olivia read the letter 5 times before calling her mother. She answered on the first ring. Mom, I'm so sorry about the news stories. Are you okay? Her mother interrupted, voice tight with worry. Where are you staying? The reporters found our apartment. They're asking me all kinds of questions. I'm safe, Olivia assured her. But Mom, he wants to meet me. Tomorrow night. A long silence followed. Anna, are you there? I'm coming to London, her mother said finally. This has gone too far. No, Mom, please. I need to do this. I'll call you right after, I promise. Another pause. He broke my heart, Olivia. But he was young, and so was I. Just be careful what you expect from him. The black car arrived exactly at 8 p.m. the next evening. The driver said nothing as Olivia slid into the back seat. They drove for nearly an hour through winding country roads, eventually passing through tall iron gates and up a long driveway lined with ancient trees. The house that appeared wasn't a palace, but a large country estate, its windows glowing warmly against the darkening sky. Lady Sheffield waited at the entrance. His Royal Highness is in the library, she said, leading Olivia through high-ceilinged rooms filled with antiques and artwork. He's alone. I'll wait outside. The library door was heavy oak. Olivia's hand shook as she knocked. Come in, called a voice from inside. Prince Edward stood by a fireplace, more casually dressed than at the hospital, in slacks and a sweater. Without all the security and noise of the public event, he seemed more human, less like a figure from television or magazines. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. You have Anna's smile, he said finally, his voice softer than Olivia had imagined. But those eyes, those are from my side of the family. Did you know about me? Olivia asked, the question that had burned inside her for years. The prince shook his head. No, never. Please believe that. He gestured to a pair of chairs by the fire. Will you sit? We have much to talk about. As they sat down, he continued. After that summer with your mother, I was called back for royal duties. An arranged marriage was being negotiated, political alliances, family expectations. Centuries of tradition. I tried to contact Anna to explain, but my letters were intercepted. By who? Olivia asked. My father's people. The palace has departments whose sole purpose is managing inconvenient situations. His voice held a bitter edge. I was told Anna had moved on, gone back to America, wanted nothing more to do with me. I believed them. I had to believe them to do what was expected of me. She tried to contact you when she found out she was pregnant, Olivia said. She wrote letters, made phone calls. Pain flashed across his face. They never reached me. The palace machine is very efficient. He leaned forward. Olivia, had I known about you, things would have been different. I would have found a way. The door burst open. A woman stood there, elegant and furious. The princess. So it's true, she said, her voice cold. Your little American mistake. Prince Edward stood quickly. Catherine, I asked for privacy. Privacy? She laughed harshly. While the whole world speculates about your secret daughter? The children are upset, Edward. The Queen is beside herself. This isn't the time, he said firmly. The princess ignored him, turning her icy gaze to Olivia. What do you want? Money? Title? Position? Let's be clear about the price for your discretion. Olivia felt sick. I don't want anything like that. Everyone wants something, the princess insisted. I wanted to know my father, Olivia said, standing up. That's all. I didn't plan for any of this to happen. Prince Edward moved between them. Catherine, please. Leave us. Your duty is to this family, Edward. The real one. With that, she turned and left, slamming the door behind her. The prince closed his eyes briefly. I apologize for that. Maybe I shouldn't have come, Olivia whispered. No. He shook his head firmly. Finding you. It's like finding a piece of myself I thought was lost forever. He walked to a desk and opened a drawer. I kept this all these years. He held out a small photograph, worn around the edges. Olivia recognized her mother, younger and laughing, sitting on a park bench. The only picture they didn't take from me, he explained. I'd often wondered what became of her, if she was happy. She raised me alone, Olivia said quietly. She works 2 jobs sometimes, but she made sure I never felt like something was missing. Tears shone in the prince's eyes. She was always the stronger one. The library door opened again. Lady Sheffield stood there, her expression grave. Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation. Someone leaked the location of this meeting. The press are at the gates. And, she added, looking at Olivia, your mother has arrived in London. She's demanding to see you. The prince and Olivia looked at each other, both realizing that their private reunion was about to become very public. The next morning, Olivia stared at the newspaper headlines spread across the kitchen table in Danny's cottage. Every single one featured her face alongside Prince Edward's. Royal Secret XPOZD screamed one. American teenager CLAIM's royal blood, declared another. The worst showed a grainy photo of her leaving the country estate. Mid-HTMEETing. Palace CVON5ONS TALKS with ALAGED or ALDAGUJTR. You're famous now, Danny said, sliding a cup of tea toward her. Not in a good way, Olivia replied, pushing the papers away. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing with notifications, and reporters had somehow found her social media accounts, leaving hundreds of messages. The cottage door opened and Olivia's mother walked in, looking exhausted after her overnight flight. Lady Sheffield followed behind her, expression grim. Mom. Olivia rushed to hug her. Her mother held her tight. Are you okay? This is exactly what I was afraid would happen. Lady Sheffield cleared her throat. Miss Matthews, Mrs. Matthews, I apologize for the intrusion, but we have a situation that requires immediate attention. Haven't you people done enough? Olivia's mom snapped. 18 years of nothing, and now this circus. Lady Sheffield remained composed. The palace has been in emergency meetings all night. The Queen is deeply concerned about the constitutional implications. Prince Edward has taken a rather unexpected position. What does that mean? Olivia asked. He wishes to acknowledge you publicly as his daughter. The room went silent. He can't do that, Olivia's mother finally said. His wife, his children. He believes it's the right thing to do. The princess, naturally, disagrees. Lady Sheffield adjusted her glasses. A car will arrive in 1 hour to take you both to the palace. The Queen wishes to speak with you. After Lady Sheffield left, Olivia's mother collapsed into a chair. The Queen? Olivia, what have you started? Danny, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. I'll make more tea. Sounds like you'll need it. The palace was nothing like Olivia had imagined. Not the public rooms shown on tours, but the private quarters, smaller, though still grand, with family photos alongside priceless artwork. They were led through corridors where staff members stopped and stared as they passed. Prince Edward waited for them outside an ornate door. He looked like he hadn't slept. Anna, he said softly when he saw Olivia's mother. It's been a long time. Edward. Her voice was cool, but Olivia noticed her mother's hands trembling. I want to explain everything, he began. Save it, she replied. I'm just here for Olivia. A clock chimed somewhere, and Prince Edward straightened his shoulders. She's ready for us. Remember, speak only when spoken to. Address her as Your Majesty first, then ma'am. The Queen was smaller than Olivia expected, but her presence filled the room. She sat perfectly straight in a blue armchair, her famous handbag beside her. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, studied Olivia carefully. "So," she said after formal introductions, "you've caused quite a commotion, young lady." "I'm sorry, Your Majesty," Olivia said, her voice barely audible. "Aren't you?" The Queen raised an eyebrow. "Coming all this way, wearing that ring openly, approaching my son at a public event. These do not seem like the actions of someone wishing to remain unnoticed." Prince Edward stepped forward. "Mother, she had every right." "I am speaking to the girl, Edward." The Queen's voice was firm. Turning back to Olivia and her mother, she continued, "This situation is unprecedented in modern times. My son wishes to acknowledge you officially. He seems quite determined." "With respect, Your Majesty," Olivia's mother said, "we didn't come here for official recognition or titles or anything like that." "Then why did you come?" the Queen asked directly. Olivia found her courage. "To know the truth. To understand why my father never knew about me, why all those letters my mom sent were ignored. To see if I belonged anywhere in his life, even just as a memory." Something softened in the Queen's expression. Truth is rarely simple in royal affairs. The door opened and the princess entered, followed by two teenage children who stared at Olivia with undisguised curiosity. "I thought we agreed they would not be part of this discussion," Prince Edward said tensely. "They have a right to meet her," the princess replied. "She's their half-sister, apparently." The words hung in the air as the royal children and Olivia looked at each other, seeing familiar features reflected back. "This doesn't have to be public knowledge," the princess continued. "A generous arrangement could be made. The girl returns to America, lives comfortably, and this embarrassment remains private." Olivia felt her mother stiffen beside her. "My daughter is not an embarrassment to be hidden away." The Queen raised her hand, silencing everyone. "Edward, you understand what official recognition would mean." "The constitutional lawyers have been quite clear." "I do, Mother." His voice was steady. "I've made my decision. It's time this family stepped into the modern world. Too many secrets, too many lives controlled for the sake of the firm." "Then I cannot stop you." The Queen sighed. "But be prepared for the consequences." Outside the palace gates, the crowd of reporters had grown. Inside, in a small sitting room, Prince Edward drafted a statement with his advisors while Olivia and her mother waited. "How do you feel about all this?" Olivia asked her mother. "Honestly, overwhelmed. Angry that they're deciding your future in conference rooms." She squeezed Olivia's hand. "Whatever happens, we go home after this, back to our real life." Lady Sheffield entered, looking grave. "The statement will be released within the hour. The prince wishes to speak with you both before the announcement." When they entered his office, Prince Edward was standing by the window, watching the crowd outside. He turned, his face resolute. "I'm acknowledging Olivia as my daughter," he said simply, "not in line for the throne, but recognized as part of the Windsor family. There will be questions, interviews, public interest, but I'll do everything in my power to protect you both." "What about your wife? Your other children?" Olivia's mother asked. His expression darkened. "Catherine is adjusting. The children are actually handling it better than the adults. They've always wanted a sister." Olivia felt dizzy. Just days ago, she was a normal teenager in Boston. Now she was about to be announced to the world as a royal daughter. "Remember," Prince Edward said gently, "you don't have to accept any of this. You can walk away, return to your life, and I would understand completely." Olivia looked at her mother, then back at him, her father. "What happens next?" Before he could answer, a palace aide burst into the room. "Sir, the princess has released her own statement to the press. She's claiming the DNA tests are inconclusive and suggesting improper motives." Prince Edward's face hardened. "So it begins." 6 months later, Olivia sat on the roof deck of their Boston apartment building, watching the sunset. The air was growing cooler as autumn approached, but she didn't mind. The past half-year had been the strangest of her life, and quiet moments like this had become precious. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. "Press conference went well. The Education Initiative launches next month. Your idea about including arts programs was a hit." She smiled, still not fully used to having casual conversations with a prince. After the chaos of those first few weeks in London, they had all agreed on a solution that worked for everyone. No royal title for Olivia, but official acknowledgement as Prince Edward's daughter. She would remain in Boston with her mother, finishing high school like any normal teenager, while building a relationship with her father through regular visits and video calls. The door to the roof opened, and her mother stepped out with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "Your royal correspondence?" she asked, nodding at the phone as she sat down. Olivia laughed. "Just Dad talking about his education thing." It had taken months before she could say Dad without it feeling strange in her mouth. "How's Danny?" her mother asked, a knowing smile on her face. "He's good, starting university next week." Olivia felt her cheeks warm. Danny had visited twice since they'd returned from London, staying in their guest room and exploring Boston with Olivia as his guide. What had begun as friendship during a crazy adventure had slowly grown into something more. Her mother looked out at the skyline. "I never expected any of this, you know. When I gave you that ring on your birthday, I thought maybe you'd want to know a little about him, ask a few questions. I never imagined you'd actually find him." "Are you sorry I did?" Her mother considered this. "No, it was time for the truth. And Edward," she paused, "he's changed. He's not the same boy I knew, but he's trying to be a father to you now, and that matters." The past 6 months had been a roller coaster. After the princess released her statement questioning Olivia's parentage, Prince Edward had done something unprecedented. Had gone on television, confirmed that DNA tests proved Olivia was his daughter, and publicly apologized to both Olivia and her mother for the years of separation caused by palace interference. The interview had shocked the nation. Some criticized him for breaking royal protocol, while others praised his honesty. The princess had retreated to her family estate, taking their children with her. The tabloids reported they were taking time apart to consider the future of their marriage. Meanwhile, the Queen had surprised everyone by publicly welcoming Olivia, inviting her for tea at the palace, and presenting her with a small family locket, not a royal jewel, but a personal gift from grandmother to granddaughter. The photos of that meeting had replaced the scandalous headlines, showing the monarchy capable of embracing change. "I got another college acceptance letter today," Olivia said, changing the subject. "International relations at Georgetown. Your father will be pleased. That's in Washington, right? Close to all those embassies and diplomats he knows." Olivia nodded. "I'm thinking about it. I could do some internships with the charities he works with." The whole experience had given her a direction she hadn't had before. Seeing how policies and protocols could separate families, how traditions could hurt real people, had sparked something in her. She wanted to work in areas that bridged different worlds, much like she now bridged 2 continents, 2 families, 2 very different realities. Her phone buzzed again. A text from her half-sister, Charlotte. "Dad showed me your last essay. Really good. Can we video chat this weekend? I need help with my history project." That had been the most unexpected development of all, the relationship that had formed between Olivia and her half-siblings. After the initial shock, Charlotte and little Henry had reached out, curious about their American sister. Now they chatted regularly, sharing school stories and inside jokes about their father's formal public persona versus how he sneezed like a cartoon character at home. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't gone looking for him?" her mother asked. Olivia thought about it. "I'd still be wondering, always feeling like part of me was missing." She fingered the signet ring, which she now wore on a chain around her neck alongside the Queen's locket. "But it wasn't really him I was missing. It was the truth." The following week, Prince Edward arrived in Boston for a 3-day visit, officially to open a new British cultural center, but really to attend Olivia's school art show. He arrived without fanfare, just a father proud to see his daughter's photography exhibition. As they walked through the gallery, people did double takes, whispering behind their hands. 6 months ago, this would have mortified Olivia. Now she just found it amusing. "This one's my favorite," the prince said, stopping in front of a black and white photograph. It showed the signet ring resting on an open palm, her mother's hand. "Mine too," Olivia replied. "You've changed everything, you know," he said quietly. "The monarchy, my life, the way I see the world." One brave girl with a ring and a question. Olivia smiled. "We both know I'm not the brave one. Mom raised me alone for 17 years. He nodded, looking across the room where Olivia's mother was chatting with some of the other parents. She always was the strongest person I ever knew. Later that evening, as they all had dinner together in Olivia's favorite local restaurant, the prince trying to figure out how to eat a burger without making a mess. Olivia looked around the table and thought about journeys. Her search for her father had started with a letter and a ring, but it had ended with something far more valuable than royal connections. It had ended with truth, family, and the knowledge that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask the question you're most afraid to have answered. The prince caught her watching him and smiled, those familiar eyes, her eyes, crinkling at the corners. "Everything okay?" he asked. Olivia nodded. "Everything's exactly as it should be."